When we look at old royal portraits, we see an illusion of perfection. These paintings were designed to project power, wealth, and an almost divine right to rule. But behind the canvas, a far darker story was unfolding. Europe's most powerful dynasty, the Spanish Habsburgs, spent centuries consolidating their power through a dangerous tradition, inbreeding. This obsession with pure blood didn't make them stronger, it destroyed them from within. Their story culminates in the tragic figure of Charles II of Spain, a king whose body was so ravaged by genetic defects that he was a biological impossibility, a living testament to his family's fatal flaw. Charles was born on November 6, 1661 in Madrid, and the problems were obvious from his very first breath. The infant had an alarmingly oversized head, his skin was pale and sickly, and he struggled to breathe. When he was presented to his mother, Queen Mariana of Austria, she reportedly recoiled in horror and refused to nurse him. The court held its breath, expecting the child to die at any moment. To understand why this royal heir was born so broken, you only need to look at his family tree. It wasn't a tree so much as a tangled circle. His mother, Mariana, was not only his mother, but also his aunt. His father, King Philip IV, had married his own niece. For the Spanish Habsburgs, this was just business as usual. Their family motto was, "Let others wage war, you, happy Austria, marry." For nearly 200 years, this meant marrying their closest relatives, uncles and nieces, first cousins, even double cousins. They believed this would keep their vast territories and immense power locked within the family. Instead, it was genetic suicide. An astonishing 80% of Habsburg marriages during this period were between close blood relatives. The gene pool became so shallow it was more like a puddle. In fact, all 8 of Charles II, Zeta and B.'s great-grandparents descended from the same couple, Philip I and Joanna of Castile. His genetic makeup was less a tapestry and more a knot. Modern science can quantify this genetic catastrophe. Charles II had an inbreeding coefficient of 0.254. To put that into perspective, the coefficient for a child born to a brother and sister is 0.25. Genetically, Charles was the product of incest, and the devastating consequences were visible from birth. He was a weak and lethargic infant who struggled to suckle because of his misshapen jaw. He rarely cried, lying pale and still in his crib. The royal physicians were completely baffled. They wrote that the child seemed fundamentally broken, but they had no idea how to fix him. By age 4, Charles still couldn't walk or speak. He suffered from severe rickets, which left his legs bowed and weak. His tongue was so enlarged that he constantly drooled, and his jaw protruded so severely that he couldn't close his mouth. He was so delayed that he wasn't weaned from his wet nurse until he was 5 years old, and he required attendants to follow him around just to wipe the constant drool from his chin. His most prominent feature was the infamous Habsburg jaw. This severe deformity, known as mandibular prognathism, meant his lower jaw jutted out so far that his upper and lower teeth couldn't meet. He couldn't chew his food. Mealtimes were a grotesque spectacle. Meats had to be minced into a paste for him, and bread was soaked in wine so he could swallow it whole. Foreign ambassadors wrote back to their courts in horror, describing the king's ghastly appearance and his struggle to perform the simple acts of eating and speaking. His speech was slurred and almost incomprehensible, muffled by his oversized tongue and misaligned jaw. Beyond his physical deformities, Charles was plagued by constant illness. He survived a gauntlet of childhood diseases, measles, chickenpox, rubella, and smallpox, but each one left him weaker than before. As he grew, he developed hydrocephalus, or water on the brain. His already oversized head began to swell, causing excruciating headaches, vision problems, and frequent seizures. His life was a cycle of sickness and recovery, with each illness chipping away at his fragile health. His education was a similar story of struggle and failure. His tutors found that while he tried, he simply couldn't retain information. One frustrated tutor noted, "His Majesty tries with effort, but retains nothing." His handwriting was barely legible, and his intellect was severely limited. Today, it is clear that his cognitive delays were a direct result of the neurological damage caused by his genetic disorders and the hydrocephalus that afflicted him. He was a king in name, but his mind couldn't grasp the complexities of ruling an empire. When puberty should have arrived, it failed. Charles remained short and underdeveloped. He never grew facial or body hair, and his voice stayed high-pitched, like a child's. He showed no signs of sexual development or libido. The court slowly came to a horrifying realization. The king was physically incapable of producing an heir. For a dynasty built on succession, this was a crisis of unimaginable proportions. The Spanish Habsburg line was destined to end with him. Desperate, the court arranged a marriage. At 18, Charles was wed to the beautiful 17-year-old French princess, Marie-Louise of Orléans. Their wedding was a shocking contrast. The radiant, healthy bride standing next to a frail, deformed groom who could barely stand on his own. The marriage was a tragedy. It was never consummated. Charles was physically incapable of the act, despite the court's bizarre and desperate attempts to cure him. They fed him potions, had him touch holy relics, and even prescribed a diet of stag organs. His own mother, convinced he was cursed, forced him to sleep beside the exhumed corpses of his ancestors, believing it might break the spell. Nothing worked. Marie-Louise, trapped in a loveless and fruitless marriage, died at just 26, possibly from a ruptured appendix. But many at the time believed she died of a broken heart. Undeterred, the court found Charles a second wife, Maria Anna of Neuburg, a German princess, chosen specifically because her family was famously fertile. She had 17 siblings. But again, there were no children. By this point, Charles's body was rapidly deteriorating. He went bald, his teeth rotted and fell out, and his seizures and hallucinations became more frequent. The people of Spain, unable to comprehend the genetic reality, gave him a new name, El Hechizado, the Bewitched. They believed he was the victim of sorcery. This led to a wave of paranoia at court. Exorcisms were performed on the king, witch trials were held, and even Charles's own confessor was accused of casting spells on him. By the time he reached 35, Charles was a shell of a man. He looked like an aged skeletal figure, unable to stand without support. His speech had devolved into incoherent mumbles. Lost in a world of pain and confusion, he truly believed he was cursed. He was adorned with amulets and holy relics, constantly undergoing bizarre rituals to ward off the demons he believed haunted him. He was a puppet ruler, his mind lost to paranoia and delusions, while his ministers ruled in his name. His life was pure agony. Finally, on November 1st, 1700, just before his 39th birthday, Charles II died. His body, which had been a medical curiosity his entire life, was subjected to a final, horrifying examination. The autopsy report is one of the most shocking documents in medical history. The physicians found his body contained not a single drop of blood. His heart was shriveled to the size of a peppercorn. His intestines were rotten and gangrenous. He had only one testicle, which was described as black and dead, and his skull was filled with water, a clear sign of extreme hydrocephalus. The doctors who performed the autopsy were stunned, not that he had died, but that he had managed to live for so long. Modern science has given us the answers that eluded Charles's doctors. Genetic analysis of the Habsburg lineage suggests he suffered from at least two major genetic disorders. The first, combined pituitary hormone deficiency, would explain his short stature, infertility, and chronic weakness. The second, distal renal tubular acidosis, a kidney disorder, would account for his rickets, weak muscles, and the hydrocephalus that plagued him. His catastrophic genetic collapse was no longer a mystery, but a predictable outcome. The death of Charles II without an heir plunged Europe into chaos. It ended the Spanish Habsburg dynasty and triggered the brutal, continent-spanning War of the Spanish Succession, which lasted for 13 years and reshaped the map of Europe. The vast Spanish Empire fractured, and the throne of Spain passed to the French Bourbon dynasty. The monarchies of Europe had learned a brutal lesson about the real-world costs of inbreeding. Charles II became a symbol of this folly, a tragic figure whose suffering advanced our understanding of heredity. The Habsburg jaw became scientific shorthand for the effects of genetic isolation. In the end, Charles II wasn't cursed by witches or demons. He was cursed by his own family tree, a victim of his ancestors' arrogance. In their obsessive quest to keep power within the family, the Habsburgs systematically destroyed their own bloodline. The story of Charles II is a chilling reminder that behind the gilded portraits and jewel-encrusted crowns lies human fragility. It's a biological and moral warning that no amount of power or prestige can defy the laws of nature. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. We'll see you next time. See you.